So I take it you've come here to see this flaming car, right? So I heard, this might just be a rumor, that the first thing that an invited speaker is supposed to do is actually to give away the spoiler, right? So the butler did it. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know too much about this movie, about the details of it, so this is my best guess at giving away the spoiler. I'm not sure if the butler did it or not, right? But what I am going to do is actually think about this question, right? Which is the radical future of self-driving cars. Is it your personal butler or a car with a mind of its own? Okay, so I won't address this question directly, but instead what I'm going to do is actually give you a long, meandering talk about some lessons that I've learned, right, working on robots over the years. Okay. So I started off by starting to work on this robot, and this is about 10 years ago. And when I started as a graduate student, my advisor, Manuel Veloso at Carnegie Mellon University, introduced me to this robot and said, get this robot to move. Okay, so that was my first task, get this robot to move, right? And I did get it to move. The robot would move around, and it got pretty good at it. And once when the robot was out roaming the hallways, my advisor comes into the lab and asks me, where is Cobot? Cobot is the name of the robot, okay? Now, I have some advice for everybody over here, right? Particularly the young girls, right? When your advisor comes into the lab and asks you a question, you should think twice before answering. I blurted out, I don't know where the robot is, right? And the moment I said that, I thought to myself, well, there's this robot which is probably worth 10 times all of my worldly possessions, and I don't know where this robot is. But then my advisor beamed and said, that's amazing. You actually sent out the robot and trusted it enough to not go crazy. That's amazing, okay? So lesson number 1, think before you act, okay? All right, so as I said, this robot did actually start moving around and actually doing things, right? It was demoed at the Intel Research Open House in 2010, where essentially it would actually take visitors between locations and actually act as a tour guide, okay? So we put a lot of effort in actually getting this robot to be safe, to always know where it is. If there's a person in the way, the robot needs to stop and not run them over. There's a lot of work that went into doing that, okay? But guess what was the most popular thing about the robot? Please excuse me. So what happened is that we put a lot of time and effort in getting this robot to be safe and reliable, and then we spent about 30 seconds writing in some code when the robot was stopped to just ask the human, please excuse me. And guess what everybody really loved? They loved the please excuse me part. Nobody cared about the fact that we spent hours and hours and hours about getting this robot to be autonomous and safe, but the please excuse me part, yes, that was great, okay? So second lesson learned, never underestimate the importance of talking to humans, okay? And a corollary to this lesson learned, humans are a tough bunch to please. Okay. All right, so we actually started deploying this robot around, right? And then we encountered some challenges, right? So normal human environments have all of these moving things around them, right? So this robot is actually stopped because it's letting these moving objects move around, right? As you might also guess, in a university, we have these couches which can move around, right? And this is actually quite confusing to a robot, right? Because it's actually trying to figure out where it is based on what it's seeing and based on what it expected to see. If the robot expected to see a chair there and it does not see a chair there, it suddenly gets confused and it's lost, right? So essentially this question boils down to where all the chairs go, right? And this was another lesson that we had to learn, which is that if you had to reliably deploy this robot in the real world, the robot actually does need to expect this change, right? And the lesson that we learned is that the world will change, and the robot really needs to expect to change it, right? So we actually spent a lot of time, this became part of my PhD thesis, which is how do you get these robots to actually expect change and incorporate them, right? So the robot didn't expect to see a chair in front of it, but the fact that it's there means that the next second it will stay there, right? And this actually made a huge difference, right? And we were actually able to deploy this robot in these large open spaces with these movable objects, and the robot would happily move around and actually perform tasks for humans on demand, okay? So that was great, right? Okay, so I'm showing you these videos of these robots, and what's interesting is that, look, the robots are actually working over here, right? They're moving around, They're performing tasks for humans, right? However, what you should now be asking is, what happens when robots go wrong? Okay. All right, to answer this question, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk to you about the UMass Minute Bots, right? We started this team. These are a robot soccer playing team. These are actually small robots. They're about the size of, I don't know, about 180 millimeters, which is 6 and something inches, right, across. And they play soccer with this orange golf ball, right? So this is a team, the human team and the robots, at actually the International Robot Soccer Competition. And let me just show you some videos of this in action. So these robots are moving around. We're taking a free kick from way up there. We steal the ball, right, and try to dribble it down the field, shoot and score a goal, right? So that's fun, right? Let me show you another video, right? We're taking a free kick from here, and our robot thinks it has an open shot, but it doesn't, but actually runs after the ball actually and is determined to score a goal, and it actually does, okay? So this is lots of fun when things actually work, right? So let me show you another video of the robot actually still working, right? So the robot's trying to intercept this ball. It beautifully intercepts exactly where the ball is, predicts where the ball is going to be, and actually tries to score on the goal, and it actually does, right? So there's a lot of computation going on behind the scenes over here. The robot's actually predicting how the ball is going to move, where is the best location to be to intercept the ball and actually score on the goal, right? So there's a lot of computation going on over here. And because of that, it can actually fail sometimes, right? So sometimes, this is what might happen. The robot tries to follow the ball, and that's it. It doesn't do anything else, right? So this is a problem, right? And the robot obviously did something wrong, but from the robot's perspective, how does it know when it's actually doing something wrong, right? There might not be anything that it's doing wrong, right? So this is a hard question to ask, and there were three of us, three researchers who actually worked on this. We were like banging our heads against a wall, wondering what we should do, how the robot should figure out what it was doing and when it was doing something wrong, right? And then we had a brainwave. You know what we should do? We should just listen to the human. When the human says, shoot at the goal, the robot knows it needs to shoot at the goal, right? Essentially, whatever the robot was doing at that point, it doesn't matter what it was doing, but it should have instead been shooting at the goal, right? So this is actually this might seem simple, but it's actually quite deep. The robot did not know when it was wrong, and the human, by telling the robot, you should shoot at the goal now, the robot knows now, this is when I was wrong, right? And the second thing that the information that you actually give to the robot is that you're telling the robot what is the correct thing to be doing, which is shooting at the goal then, right? With these two pieces of information, the robot can actually think about, well, based on my estimates at that point, what was wrong and what was preventing me from doing what the human is saying, right? And if you can figure out what was preventing the robot from doing what the correct thing to do, then the robot can fix itself, right? So that's the next lesson learned, which is essentially listen to humans, okay? All right, so I've been talking about robots so far, but really Christine is about cars, right? And you've already seen in the news and on TV all of these self-driving cars. There's so many companies out there. There are new companies being formed for self-driving cars every day, right? But what's interesting is that many of these technologies that are used in these self-driving cars is very similar to actually what's being used in our autonomous robots, right? All of these things that we've been working on for decades are applied to these self-driving cars, okay? So let's come back to this question then, right? The radical future of self-driving cars, your personal butler or a car with a mind of its own, right? So this is a question that we started out with, okay? I'm going to confess to you now that I don't have an answer, right? But here's what I'm going to try to do. We, the AI community, have learned a lot, right? We still have a lot to learn, right? Let's keep learning, right? And all of these lessons that we have learned still apply to self-driving cars, and hopefully that will end up with better self-driving cars of the future, right? So all of this work which I spoke about would not have been possible, like, without all of these wonderful students and all of the researchers in our lab. So I just want to thank everybody over there. You can see all of our robots. And if any of you want to actually come see robots working in the real world, performing tasks, contact me. I'm happy to host you at UMass, okay? All right, let's get back to the show. And Christine, hope you have a wonderful movie. Thank you.